In this video, I'm going to show you how to claim the new deduction for qualified overtime compensation. The guidelines and restrictions for this are listed on the irs.gov website. It's pretty broad. Most likely, if you worked overtime during 2025, you will be able to claim this deduction. So I've seen a lot of videos on what this deduction is, but not exactly how to apply it to your own taxes and where to put it, where it goes, what forms to fill out. Um, this is just going to assume you do your own taxes. It's really easy, or at least need to calculate the deduction amount for some tax software that you're doing. Anyways, so to get the qualified overtime compensation amount, it might be listed in box 14 of your W-4 under something like FLSA, OTC, something like that. Employers are actually not even required to list it here, so most likely you're going to have to calculate it for yourself. If it is listed down here, I would recommend double checking with your employer to make sure that is what it is, because it can be all sorts of different letters, all sorts of different amounts down here. Just make sure you know what you're getting, or calculate it yourself like I'm going to show you. So you're going to need your last pay stub of 2025. So in 2025, your base rate is $16. And when you worked overtime, you got 1.5 times, which is $24 an hour. So this isn't actually my last pay stub, but I got a total for the year. My total overtime hours worked in 2025, 64.30. If you had a rate change, a basis of pay change, whatever, throughout the year, I can show you how to calculate it. If you got a raise throughout the year at the end, but I'm going to do the most simplified version and then save that for the end. So what you'll need is your base pay amount, your overtime amount, your hourly rates, and then the total overtime hours you worked for the year. $16 an hour regular rate, 24 hours overtime. So basically, the qualified overtime compensation rate is going to be the additional dollars per hour that you made on top of your hourly rate for overtime. So I earned $8 more per hour when I was working overtime than I did when I was working my regular hours. And that's just $24, my overtime rate, minus 16, my regular hourly rate. Next, your overtime hours total for the year. You can get this off your pay stub or get the summary totals like I did from my employer. And then to calculate the qualified overtime compensation amount, you just multiply that $8 additional hourly pay for overtime, multiplied by 64.3, which is my total overtime hours worked in 2025. So I got $514.10 additional for the qualified overtime compensation deduction here. So where this number goes, you're going to have to Google Schedule 1-A 2025. Make sure that it says 1-A in the top left and 2025 on the top right. Otherwise, this section won't be included in prior year forms. Just make sure it's 2025. This form is very easy to fill out, like most things on your taxes, especially if you just have a W-2. This will be very simple. Fill in your name and your social at the top. On line 1, you're going to need your adjusted gross income, which you can get by filling out your Form 1040. Basically, that'll just be if you have a W-2 and only a W-2, which I know applies to a lot of people. That will basically just be your top left box 1 amount from your W-2. And then it basically, you just write the same number over and over again. I had student loan deductions that I took out. So my adjusted gross income that I'm going to put at the top of that form is $22,440. I didn't live in Puerto Rico. I didn't have any of these other forms. If you just have a W-2 or a really simple tax return like student loans and overtime like mine, you won't really have any of these. So again, $22,440. I'm not going to include a demonstration on the no tax on tips, no tax on car loan interest or deductions for seniors. This is just about overtime, this video. So that $514, the qualified overtime compensation that I calculated back here, is going to go right here in line 14A of your Schedule 1A. If you have a 1099 NEC, which is self-employment, subcontractor income, or a 1099 miscellaneous, which is like rents, royalties, and that job paid overtime, then you will have to fill this out, but that doesn't apply to most people. If you just got a W-2 or just a W-2 and like student loan, stuff like that, you won't need this unless you got a 1099. So most people won't have this. So I basically just take that number, add line 14A, 14B. I didn't have any 1099 income or overtime, so I put that 514 here again. This next line basically deals with if you're coming up against the cap, which is 150,000, then you start seeing a diminishing deduction amount. I did not earn 150,000. I had just the smaller of those two numbers, which most likely you will too. So again, 514. A lot of these forms, if you're doing your own taxes, it's just writing the same number over and over again and leaving stuff blank. It's really not that difficult, and I encourage you to do it. Enter the amount from line 3 up here at the top. That was my adjusted gross income. Enter 150,000 if you're single, 300,000 if you're married filing jointly. Please note that if you are wanting to claim this credit and you're married, I believe you have to file a joint return and fill out this section to claim the no tax on overtime credit. I'm single, so I'm going to enter 150,000. If you're filing jointly, 300,000. So most people, if you're single, 150,000. Line 17 subtracted from line 16, that's going to be less than 0, so I put 0. And then importantly, we're almost done. If 0 or less, enter the amount from line 15 on line 21. So again, we're copying the same number, 514, down here to 21. And if you didn't have any of these to fill out, these are all just things to reduce your tax liability, to deduct from your income. Again, if you're doing this through a filing software, unless they specifically ask for your qualified overtime compensation, do not assume it's going to automatically somehow integrate this credit into your return. You just won't get this money. You won't get any of these savings. If it doesn't specifically ask about that, it will not do it automatically. So that's why doing your own taxes can be beneficial, because I know some of the tax filing sites and softwares do not even include this part. So anyways, since I don't have any no tax on tips, whatever, no tax on car loan interest, I have a pretty simple return. The total, where you just add all this together, is going to be line 21, $514 total. So now, as it says here, put this on your form 1040 on line 13B. And this is where it's going to play into your tax return. Take that 514, go to line 13B, additional deductions from Schedule 1A, line 38. That's going to be that $514. And as you see, that actually increases the deductions that I'm getting for this year. So what that's doing is it's when you subtract the gross income by this increased amount, it actually lowers my taxable income and lowers the taxes that I'm going to have to pay, or basically the refund that I'm going to get for this year. So yeah, just make sure you fill out the form 1A and make sure that you carry that over to line 13B, because that will help your taxes if you did any overtime this year. Now, if you earned a different hourly rate where you got a raise throughout the year, it's going to be a little more complicated, but really not that much more complicated. So you're going to go back to your last pay stub of the year, and it's going to have your regular rate before the raise, your regular rate after the raise, your overtime rate before the raise, your regular rate, or your overtime rate after the raise. So again, you're going to need that overtime rate, the overtime hours worked. You're going to need both the pay rates before the raise and after the raise. So let's say I went from $19.75 an hour, I got a raise, and I got $21.34 an hour. It's going to say the exact overtime dollar per hour rates on your pay stub. If you got the raise and you got overtime, it will say these amounts on your pay stub. I worked 19 hours of overtime before the raise, 9.4 hours after the raise. Let's calculate the qualified overtime compensation. So the overtime compensation rate was just the overtime rate minus base times that 19 hours there. That's before the raise. And then after I got the raise, I worked 9.4 more hours. So do that same calculation. And then this is going to be the total qualified overtime compensation is these two added together. So this is going to be that amount that I put in that Schedule 1A form. So it's not too much more difficult. But yeah, this video just shows how you calculate that and how it plays into your taxes.